Welcome back to the Nimble Youth Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Butterman, and today we're talking about a topic that I think many parents, educators, and mental health professionals are noticing, but may not fully understand. It's the increasingly complex challenges facing teen boys today. From emotional overwhelm to academic disengagement, boys are struggling in ways that are both familiar and surprising. And today we're going to unpack that with someone who sees this work every day. Before we dive in, a couple of facts to frame the conversation. In his book Of Boys and Men, author Richard Reeves, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, makes the case that boys and men in America are falling behind in key areas of life, including education, work, and social connection. While girls and young women have made significant gains in academic achievement over recent decades, boys have not kept pace. It's a dynamic that teachers and counselors are observing in classrooms across the country. It knows that boys are now less likely than girls to excel in traditional academic environments, and that this isn't just about grades, but about how boys engage with schooling, relationships, and purpose. These educational disparities have ripple effects to career paths, mental health outcomes, and social identity. We also know that boys and young men are disproportionately represented in school disciplinary actions. They're more likely to feel disengaged in structured learning environments, and they often struggle to find meaningful support for emotional and relational challenges. So what's going on here? What are the real day-to-day struggles teen boys are facing? And how do we, as caregivers and community members and parents, respond in effective, compassionate ways? To help answer these questions, I'm thrilled to welcome Jarrod Hoffman, a licensed professional counselor based in Memphis, Tennessee. Jarrod works extensively with teens, young adults, schools, and families. Jarrod, welcome to Nimble Youth.
Thanks, Matthew. It's a pleasure to be here.
So your work with teens and in school settings gives you a front row perspective on what boys are actually dealing with. To start us off, can you share a little bit about how you came to work with teens in general, and then especially teen boys particularly?
Sure. Yes, I had my parents get divorced when I was 10 years old. I saw porn for the first time at 11, which is later than what boys and teens have experienced now.
Wow.
My age is much younger.
Yeah.
And I didn't find counseling until I was 25 years old. And I'm really passionate about making that gap smaller. And that's how I got into counseling teens particularly, but counseling in general.
Right. And so teen boy comes in for counseling. What are some of the first things that you kind of notice or find out about them, the problems they're engaging with?
Sure. I have two parts to my work at the moment. And so one is on the private practice side in a group setting, and then another is on site at a school. And so I'll try to make that distinct when it makes sense. But behavior is the word that's thrown around a lot. And it's funny that you already said the word purpose. I don't think I have a whole lot of people who say that their child or the child that they're seeing is just struggling with a lack of purpose. They usually call out the behaviors that they're seeing.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I was just reading all of this weekend by David Brooks from the New York Times, where he makes a claim that what's the problem with so much of America right now is that we've kind of lost our sense of purpose, whether it's religion or just belief in kind of ourselves in general, not seeing sort of a way forward. So I think purpose is really, really important to the mental health of the nation writ large, and certainly for boys and teenagers in general in that part of their lives. So Richard Reeves and others, they've talked about the male struggle in education, and they highlight how boys are often behind academically compared to girls. That's a statistic, but what does that look like in real life for a teen boy? How do you see them kind of dealing with those academic struggles?
That is one of the bigger questions.
Do you think it's maybe an issue with the way schools are set up? Do you see maybe the traditional educational settings maybe favor girls in many ways and the way they learn?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different things happening. I probably can speak a little bit more to the smaller individual things that I see versus kind of education practices. And yeah, so one of the things that comes to mind is a very specific thing. And it's just this idea of what we call teens. And there's this line that says that teenagers didn't exist, 50, 75 years ago.
Right.
We had to give them something to do. Yeah, I think some of it is what we call students or teenagers particularly. I hear the word kiddo a lot. I hear there's a school close by who calls their students scholars. And there's a joke among my teacher friends at that school, like scholars. They're not producing scholarly work, but we live into what people call us. And so I think particularly with teenage boys, they'll be called a kiddo for till 12, 13, maybe even 14 years old. And the reality is, if we call them something that we're aspiring for them to be, like a gentleman, I know that's so ancient, a man even. Of course, they don't have all the responsibilities of a man at the moment, but if we continue to call them kiddo, they're just going to live into that language. So that's like a very practical thing that I see. Maybe teachers, admin, in an effort to kind of say where they're at, forget to say where they want them to be.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a very important point. Referring to them as young men, because that's what they are. And if we have this idea of a sort of an endpoint of where they want to be, that makes their arrival at that endpoint much more likely, right? If we keep calling them kids, then they'll be kids, or as long as we keep calling them that. So yeah, I think a really important point there. A lot of listeners will wonder, just because, boys are bad at school, or is it, the system itself is kind of mismatched with how boys learn or how they express themselves. And I know, certainly talking with other educators and therapists who work with teens, there's a real distinct difference between how girls developed, psychosocially, and how boys develop. And so what do you think the disconnect is there? And are there ways that we can better approach how to meet boys where they're at?
Yeah, I love what Jordan Peterson says about aggression. I think in that behavior kind of referral that we talk about, how they show up because they've been referred for bad behavior or aggressive behavior. Jordan Peterson says we want boys to be aggressive. We just want them to be aggressive in a pro-social way. So what fun would football be if the players stood around and just talked about what they were going to do on the field, and I'll let you go right to the end zone and just score. That'd be fun. No, we want to see them hit each other and tackle each other, but we know that once the play is over, anything after that is unacceptable.
Right.
We need to learn how to harness that as a man. Yeah. And I think maybe one of the tendencies in the education system that I've seen is just the kind of, we have to prepare them for the test. We don't have as much freedom. And so we have to stamp out that behavior so that we can get the work done. And I think that can take maybe some of these positive feelings that we have, like aggression, anger, in the positive sense, which would be passion. And we just say, hey, you can't even feel that, rather than let's direct that in a way. And that's just super challenging when you've got 30 kids in a classroom.
Yeah. So much of it is just, a lack of the ability to sort of deal with people individually, which, would solve so many of these problems, I suppose. But one size does not fit all for all students, certainly, right? Yeah, reminds me, this is before your time, I'm sure, but there was a cartoon, when I was growing up. It was, a Bugs Bunny cartoon with Wile E. Coyote and this sheepdog, and they would fight each other to the death. But before the fights occurred, they'd punch in at this workstation out in the forest somewhere, and hey Ed, how's it going, Charles? And then they'd punch in, and then you could grab them by the neck, and then afterwards they'd punch out. Great day today. See you tomorrow. It's the same sort of thing. We have to be aggressive. Sometimes in our professional and even our academic lives, but we have to be gentlemen when we're not in that competitive arena, I suppose. Yeah. So let's talk specifically about mental health issues. So we're seeing rising levels of anxiety, depression, and overwhelm in boys too, and not just girls. What are some of the emotional experiences you see most often with the boys that you work with?
For sure, the anxiety and the depression is real and prevalent. am trying not to just continue to go right to screens. I think that's maybe more of a symptom. We talk about behavior, right? That's just a symptom of what's going on.
Yeah.
I think if you're seeing a behavior, I think about it in sort of like if your car isn't working. You hear the noise, which alerts you to what's happening underneath.
Right.
And there's two options here. You hear the noise, it's clanking. We got to get that taken care of. And something that's often ignored is that there are things that can be going on in your engine where you don't know. Maybe you don't know, you can't hear it for some reason, or it's in a part of the car that's, over a little far away. And so I think we have boys who show up with behavior and also boys who show up with no behavior and they're excelling at school. But a lot of the root causes can be the same. I think you're right. Shame, guilt, loneliness, and isolation. We're struggling as a culture to have deep community. And for teens, it doesn't even have to be many. You'd be 2 to 3 good friends. I think some of the factors that make finding those deep friendships challenging, you might have 3 to 4 surface level friends. I mean, this is true for adults too. So often when they come in, they are around people, but they don't have deep and meaningful connections. Most of their interactions with their parents revolve around what they're doing wrong in school, what they need to be doing. And that's why I think the work of counseling is so powerful and almost so easy, is because it's the one place that they come in and just be heard, understood, and connected with.
And not judged. And it's a kind of a way to start a relationship afresh, right? Without any kind of preconceived notions. Yeah, I think it's a really important point. What do you think contributes to boys having, when I say boys, I mean teenagers, but in particular teenage boys having a harder time seeking support or reaching out for help? Is that just something within the gender? Is a characteristic of the male gender writ large, or is there something in our society today that maybe is contributing to that? What do you think that is?
Probably tons of reasons. One of the reasons that I'd love to connect is we talk about purpose. We talk about what we expect of boys. So much of that is wrapped up in a future that hasn't yet been realized. Got to go to college is the best example. I'm not saying college is good or bad, but you have to go. That kind of draws them into a purpose that they haven't necessarily chosen for themselves. When you have a teenager, they're in the midst of Erickson's stage of finding out what their identity is. That also involves kind of interest, passion, direction, purpose. And so if I've given a teenager a purpose, and then most of my conversation with them revolves around how they're not achieving that purpose, well, it might not be theirs to begin with. I know a lot of the teenagers come into the office and their parents have them there for one reason, and it's 10 minutes into the conversation or less before we talk about what really has brought them there.
Yeah.
Could you imagine what you would, maybe some of these boys, what they would be met with if they said, hey, I want to go to counselor and I want to talk about my lack of purpose. And the parent says, well, when are we going to find time for that? You have to do this sport. You have to do this extracurricular. Your grades are suffering and we've got to get you into a good college. So I think that's one facet I could see, is this being wrapped up in what the future is versus being aware of what's presently important and necessary for their thriving.
I guess leaning on from that, so you worked with schools in the past, and so are there sort of structural or cultural elements within schools that you see making a difference, whether it's a positive difference or a negative difference for engagement, particularly with boys and their psychosocial well-being? There's certain things that work particularly well for them that I see.
Yeah. This, once again, I've worked with a few schools. I wouldn't consider myself an expert on the school implementation of this. One of the things that's very exciting about the school that I'm at is that I'm contracted to get provide individual and group counseling. And that has been fascinating because it's almost as close to in vivo as you can be. The behavior doesn't have to go through the tracks of, hey, we're seeing this at school. Can you please take them to a counselor? I think they need more help. And then months go by and then they finally get connected with a counselor. No, as soon as that form is signed, I can see them, I can pull them from a class. And, one of the interesting things that we've seen in the data that we've collected is that the student actually may not talk about school or even the behaviors that they're there for, or they've been referred because of. And yet we see the grades improve. We see their behavior improve. And so what's working in schools, I think schools can really benefit and students can really benefit in trying to make that referral to a counselor, or whether that's a counselor, it's a church leader, it's a whoever in their community is going to be beneficial for them as soon as possible. Make that gap even smaller, because one of the realities of my going to counseling for the first time at 25 is I ended up talking about the stuff that was happening when I was 15, 13. And so the closer we can make that resource, whether that is a counselor, a pastor, maybe it's not doing the sport and it's doing something that actually interests them to give them a little bit more purpose. And so obviously schools have a lot on their plate, but making that as those partnerships as solid as they can is super helpful.
Yeah.
I think one other thing. Yeah.
No, I think that's a really important point. Just increasing access to these support structures for mental and behavioral health is really important.
Yes. And that's why you're doing what you're doing with this podcast.
Absolutely.
Maybe a very practical thing I would call out as well. And this is on the school side, and this is also on the parent side. And it's something I've been very passionate / angry about recently, is this idea, I think, in education and even in the parenting, we're stewarded with their education at a time. Let's be present for that time. What happens, parents fall into this trap of saying, or parents or admin saying, hey, if you're struggling right now, just wait until, what's next? What's the next line? Just wait until the real world. Exactly. The real world. What about their experience in 10th grade is not the real world?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Are there less responsibilities?
Sure. It's their experience today, right?
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really important point, I think. So I want to discuss a little bit about something you brought up earlier in the discussion. So a lot of digital pressures today, things like social media, gaming, isolation, and you mentioned porn, digital porn. I like to call the trifecta of vices that boys are kind of exposed to, and that's gaming, porn, and then now sports betting or gambling. Those are sort of traps that they can easily fall into. So for the parents listening, how can they help boys in particular? And of course, it's a problem across genders here, but how can they help boys in particular from sort of falling into those rabbit holes, those funnels of vice, if you want to call them that?
Yes. Wow. I'm glad you mentioned the sports gambling. Just saw an article on that, just the statistics of how many children under 18 are gambling through these platforms.
Yes.
Man, first, read Anxious Generation. If you haven't done it, Audible, whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
You got to read it. I think it challenges us as well as parents to confront our own anxiety. I think the super important point is, if the device is already there, which probably already there, having to move our mindset from protection to equipping. You can't, even if you've given them a phone you've held off for some amazing miracle till 13, the time of first porn exposure is, they say it's 9, but it's because some of these kids don't even know the age that they first saw it. And so if you're talking about trying to protect them at age 13 and they've had 4 years of porn exposure, we need to drastically change our mindset on what our role is. We have to bring it up There's a research that I found that's just sort of silly in how simple it is, but it was that having a conversation about sex is significantly more impactful in their behaviors than not having it at all. So I think a lot of parents think, well, it's super awkward. It's like, well, if it's not awkward, you're probably not doing it right.
Right.
And if you, what you want is maybe that behavior or the hiding to disappear, having the conversation is a must. It's also not a one-time thing. It's a constant thing. They should be maybe annoyed how much you're talking about the realities of sports gambling, pornography, video game addiction, cell phone addiction. Hey, this is just going to be something we bring to light, especially because parents are struggling with that too.
Right.
So I think opening up that conversation in a non-judgmental way is crucial.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that's really hard for parents to navigate is, you want to develop in your child, you want to develop the ability to deal with these sort of temptations that are omnipresent, right? They're all around us. You want to have sort of an organic ability to deal with these temptations, because at some point, if you restrict access to them at some point in their lives as they grow up, that your limits on that, it's not going to be in their lives anymore. Typically it's when kids go to college, but sometimes it's if they move somewhere else, or keep traveling, whatever, they're exposed to these things. And so I think you want to try to develop, or cultivate sort of the inner ability to deal with these things, rather than, this sort of external limit that the parents are placing on them. Any thoughts you have on how that might be cultivated or best dealt with?
In terms of how to give them tools and equip them, because you're going to lose them in the sense of like you lose your ability to control the situation if they leave the house.
Yeah, just sort of the ability to probably regulate, I guess.
Yes, I think prioritizing physical world experiences is so valuable and crucial. I mean, you can have, we're having this conversation virtually, and I feel connected to you, and it's very possible. But if we were in the same room, it would just be something that we could like physically hold on to, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I should say a competing argument here is that there is research on therapy being virtual is as effective as in-person therapy. And I think that speaks to the connection that you feel. But when I say physical, I think of driving, for example. We are much more willing to let our teenager play GTA and do whatever they want in a car and beyond, but we're so fearful to give them the keys to a car.
Right.
Maybe that's even because of the cost and whatever it might be. We're more interested in just allowing them to do what they need to on a device than giving them a physical experience of driving. And so you think about the child who has maybe been driving at 16 and learning that responsibility that's going to come with being in the real world. They're already in the real world. And now we're adding this layer of responsibility and trust versus, you know what, this is really hard. You are really scared about this thing. I'm not going to push you. I think that goes down to purpose. If I'm stuck in my room playing GTA and the physical world of driving and responsibility that comes with it, of course it's going to be scary. I don't have that option. I'm not going to feel very much purpose. A story for me is I think I had a bad attitude with my mom. And we were lined up. We had the beat up car in the driveway. I don't know if it started, and we were ready to go. And she decided, hey, you have a bad attitude. You're not taking the trash out. Something's got to change if you want to drive your car to school. And so I think it took me 6 months to kind of figure that out and have a better attitude. And once that was solved, I got the keys to the car. And so, there's a statistic particularly on driver's license.
What you're saying about
boys and teens are waiting longer to get their driver's license.
Promoting those
that has to do with
cherishing those.
We're not build. Yeah.
So before we wrap up, a couple of questions I just wanted to get your take on. What do you think parents should hear from what we've been talking about today? What do you think is the most important thing they should value when supporting their sons? What are the most important keys to giving them support So that's sort of part one. Then part two would be what gives you, we've talked so much about what's wrong with boys today. What gives you hope of being able to cultivate our boys into, young, good male role models for the future?
Yeah, two things I think I would share with parents. Number one, you are the most important human relationship on the planet.
Yeah.
I can do great work in the counseling relationship as they sit on my couch, but they are not going to be talking about their connection with their counselor over their connection with their parent in 10 years. Maybe it's a good instance of healing, whatnot, but they're going to be navigating their relationship with you for the rest of their life.
Right.
You are the most important human on the planet out of like 8 billion people. So fostering that relationship is a game changer. The second thing I would tell parents, and this is a practical tool, and I'll keep it as short as I can here. There's this idea in motivational interviewing, which is a style, almost a theory of counseling that I use all the time. It's the idea that the person sitting across from us, whether that's the teen in our lives or the person in the therapy room or the student that we're teaching, is on the verge of trying to make a change. And change doesn't happen most of the time because of gaining any knowledge. Most of the people sitting across from us have all the knowledge they need. And the example is, if a teen needs to make a change about their school, maybe I need to study more or whatever the example is, their parents have told them everything they need to know. Their teacher has instructed them everything they need to know. They can write a list of 1 to 10 what I need to do to get the A. It's not hard. The hard part is deciding that I would rather get the A than be on my phone a little bit more and lose that social connection, or get the A and maybe even like practice the sport to get better than goof off and go play a video game, whatever those examples are. And so the tool I would give parents is like, think about, they don't need more knowledge. They need more space to discover the reason for making the change. And that won't come from you giving your opinion, giving what worked for you when you were a kid. It won't be on critiquing what they're doing. It won't be making a joke, sarcasm, trying to get them to change. It will be empathy to understand and help reflect that. So the tool is reflecting what they say. You're lost in a conversation. You naturally go to just trying to tell them. I would challenge you to reflect back what you hear. So if they're struggling with a decision, just repeat back what you heard them say. So it might go something like this. Yeah, I want to go to the party and I don't want to study. You're really having a hard time deciding whether to go to the party or study. Often they just fill in the rest and they keep talking, especially if that relationship has been built. We want to go give our opinion instead of try to understand. And the best part about reflecting back what you hear, word for word, if it requires that, you are struggling to decide to go to the party or study. If you do that, they're going to feel understood. Or you're wrong. No, actually, I'm disappointed for XYZ. Oh, okay. You're not frustrated. You're disappointed. Tell me more about that. So I would challenge a tool, reflect back what you hear, and just know they don't need more knowledge. They need more space to discover, and you can help them do that 100%.
Yeah. I guess important point. So what gives you hope about boys today? That's a loaded question, I know.
Yeah, teen boys haven't lost the ability to change their lives. If you are a counselor or a teacher or a parent, even, you're going to be burnt out if you think that teens in this day and age just don't have the ability to make a change in their life. They 100% do. It's the reason I keep showing up. When teens come in, they decide to make a change, they do it, they see their progress, and then I don't see them again because they got better. So I'm super encouraged.
Validates your work, certainly. So you don't want to see them for too long, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think, a positive thing that has come from maybe some of the cultural things that we've experienced the last several years is is maybe I see teens more open to share about their feelings. They're willing to talk about that. Maybe not quite as much to adults, but certainly with each other. The amount of times that they say things that I go, I had to go through a master's degree to learn that word, and they know it.
Yeah.
And they want to talk about it. And I think that's just super encouraging. I think we'll see, if we can work through some of the other things that they have been exposed to, I think we'll see a generation of people who are willing to talk about hard things because they've just been in it and they're willing to talk about it. I think that's going to be exciting. Say that again.
Yeah. More dialogue equals better collective, behavioral and mental health for sure. That's why we're doing this today. Well, Jarrod, I want to thank you for our conversation today. It's been really important, really, really thoughtful. And thank you for sharing your insights. And for anyone who wants to learn more about your work or connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. My website is jarrodhoffman.com. I'm on LinkedIn. If you're a LinkedIn person, you can email me. My email's jarrod@jarrodhoffman.com. I'd love to hear about what's working for your teen, what's not. I offer therapy, virtual and in person, in Memphis, so the state of Tennessee. If someone you know or love is in need of therapy, they could reach out to me about that in the state of Tennessee. Otherwise, if you're in need of coaching services as a parent, or honestly, if you just need resources and you want to talk, please feel free to email me. I do run some parent kind of workshops or offer talks, as well as some teen group type things. And so, just stay in touch and feel free to sign up for a newsletter if you need it. Do that about once a month, and that's available on my website.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Jarrod, and we'd love to have you on again. Please come join us again. I know there's so many things that we can delve more deeply into. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And if you found this episode helpful, please do subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave a rating wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time on the Nimble Youth Podcast. Until then, please take care of yourselves and the young people in your lives. Bye for now.